It was a good one.
You could have done it.
Garrett, next wedding.
Are we online in the back?
We're live.
We're live? All right, I've got 6 o'clock, so we will get started. We'll call our meeting to order. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And as we get started, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll all stand with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Carrie, if you'll read the roll call.
Mr. Steinberg?
Here.
Mrs. Rorich? Here. Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Whittington?
Here.
Mayor Oranger?
Here. And we do have a quorum. I will remind the council members if we can utilize these microphones and speak directly into them, keep them on so everybody can hear as we go. Is my volume okay out there?
Yep, very good.
All right. We are here tonight. We do want to welcome everyone. We're here tonight to have a presentation from Bradford Development and their engineers in regard to the Mankato Motorsports Park. And this is for supplemental EAW information for the council to review environmental review that the proposer has done. It's not a public hearing, so I know a lot of you have all sorts of things that you want to say. We'll see if we can get to some questions maybe at the end for the developer if there's particular items that we can address through that. But for the most part, what we're here tonight is to have the City Council understand the additional review that has been done on the EAW. And then we need to make a decision on our part to either accept the information as presented to us, send it back for additional information, or as we accept it, we send it on to the EQB. And I don't know, Jennifer, if you have a slide to show all that. I know we've looked at that before, but there's a process that we used previously that goes out to governmental agencies and the public for public comment. Then on that, there's a 30-day period that we go through. So that's kind of what we're here for tonight. So any questions from the council before we begin? And so Brad, Mr. Bass, I would invite you to the podium and again, just state name and address for the record for anyone that's speaking tonight. And then I guess our question will be if you can present your information to the council. Sure. So we can make a decision.
Brad Bass, 4336 Linder Bay Lane, Madison Lake. So the last time we were here, you'd asked me to put together a comprehensive kind of a supplement to the supplement to help you understand what was being asked from the appeal on the decision made on the EIS. So Bolton and Mank had put together their response to the questions from the appeal, and with that, we'd asked them to put together kind of a comprehensive report for each one of the responses that were added for that supplement. In that, we also added the component for the Kopacek property, in which Tony Steffenmeyer is building 2 properties as well. So I think I'd like to turn it over to Jason Femright from Bolton and Mank, and he can walk through that for your review.
Sorry. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Femright, Principal Engineer with Bolton and Mank out of Mankato. I also, with me tonight, have a couple of the technical experts that have helped us prepare this. Gina is on the teams with us, and then Dan Denaire is in the audience. So as far as some of the technical questions, if they do arise from the council, I can certainly rely on them to help with this. So what I wanted to do here tonight is to do a brief presentation of this supplemental EAW, extra homework, we'll call it, from our original EAW that was approved and submitted. So we had the state of Minnesota's Court of Appeals filed on April 26, 2021, a few items that we needed to address, and that is what we've included in this supplemental EAW information, along with reference to the original EAW itself. So I do have a few slides we'll kind of go through here. Obviously, it's a significant document that we've prepared here with some attachments to it, and certainly open to questions as we get to that. So really, some of the key updates that we are looking at with this EAW is some of the land cover updates to what this site is going to entail. There was maybe some concern that it was going to be all grass or turf areas out there, where that's definitely to the contrary. We will have some residential turf in and around the buildings, but essentially most of the road course itself will have the short grasses, natives with grasses, and pollinators with herbs and forbs within that area. And then as we go out to those outer ridge areas of the track and towards the berm, we're looking at some of the tall prairie grass, native in nature, that will be out there. Eagle Lake is a DNR designated wildlife lake with no control outlet structure. So lake drawdown is not utilized as an active management tool to Eagle Lake. So we discussed that. Incorporated wildlife surveys by the Minnesota DNR Shallow Lakes Program and federal species survey data within the report. We did conduct some additional noise analysis, which included 5 additional receptors along the shores, and then 1 actually in the middle of the lake to kind of further demonstrate the in situ conditions that are out there relative to what is projected with this facility. And then also the greenhouse gas levels, kind of just for some comparison, the Highway 14, 1 mile adjacent to this, has about 9.51 tons of CO2 per day, and the road course is expected, based on some of these projections, to be about 0.03 tons per day. So there's no Minnesota National Ambient Air Quality Standards for this, and again, with the native grasses and plants within the site will help facilitate some of that carbon uptake. So I wanted to highlight some of the actual items within this report that address those Court of Appeals action items that they were requesting. So the city lacks substantial evidence to support its determination that the project has no potential to significant effect on wildlife as a whole. The record contains no evidence about the project's effect on the wildlife, and there was no attempt to identify, survey, or catalog some of that. So we did do some more discussions that are within the report itself on pages 10 through 16 where we've included some of that survey data, and also some of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services did identify the bald eagle, along with the lesser yellowlegs, which I'm not that familiar with, and their potential use of this area, and that kind of coincides with outside of what we're looking at for this facility's opening of April through October. And then also just kind of pointing out some of the impacts that currently exist out within the region. So providing a little bit more information on the wildlife that's there and the potential impacts. And then we're talking about the designated wildlife lake itself would be damaged by the proposed project, would generate noise, heavy vehicular traffic, fumes, and also that turf lawn. The city did not address the potential harm to wildlife or the lake's recreational value through these various items. So we just provided some clarity on those pages. Some of the impacts due to fumes, vehicle and human traffic, and the small amount of turf lawn are there, but we don't feel like they're even close to a point where they are impacting the lake itself. The proposed course, again, we're talking about 20 cars operating for about 50 minutes per hour, 2 minutes per lap during daylight hours only. The MPCA and the fish and the wildlife provided little published data and analysis on noise effects on wildlife from non-highway focused projects. But we did look at, obviously, the linear type projects with roads themselves. And again, that additional noise analysis was done and provided within this report. The increase in GHG emissions is negligible and should not have negative impacts to the wildlife or the surrounding residents. The driving track will not be lighted, and we're not talking about lights along the course, just would be lights in and around the condo areas themselves. But again, it's a daytime use and no track lights are proposed. And then again, further discussion on the turf and the grasses themselves. So we've kind of included items C and D here, where we're talking about the substantial evidence for the determination that noise from this project has no potential to significant effect on wildlife, as well as the shoreland and the water of the lake as a noise impact. So the 2022 noise analysis compared the current Highway 14 to the proposed conditions and found the modeled noise levels along the shores of Eagle Lake. Areas of nesting and gathering are negligible. Therefore, an in-depth wildlife study would not be warranted to this project due to noise itself. So here's a little bit of a brief snippet of the noise analysis where those receptors were. And again, the existing noise from Highway 14 was monitored, and then the proposed noise from this facility was run in comparison to that, or in conjunction with that, along with the berming areas, and provided that it's little to no change in the existing habitat as that exists here today. This was an image of, people are talking about what does this berm look like, what is our noise measures. So we've just kind of put together a sample cross-section of the berm itself, and then the proposed wall on top of that as needed to meet the criteria that we've outlined in our noise study to make sure that we're in compliance with what we say we're going to be doing. And this last slide is the track layout that was that we've been utilizing all along with the berming associated with that. The one change that we did was adding those two storage buildings immediately adjacent to the berm itself. We've just kind of slid the berm, obviously maintained the integrity of it, and just slid that to be able to accommodate those couple of storage buildings that is going to be also proposed. Everything else on it, we did some of the clarifications on the turf itself, where we're proposing the taller grasses and then the shorter pollinator type grasses within the infield itself. So that's the long and short of what I had to present here. And again, I have a couple of experts here with us that can help maybe answer any of the council's questions or comments. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Arnger.
All right, thank you. I will open it up to questions from the council. I'll kick it off with mine, I guess. Can you give us a little bit of a detailed explanation with how the noise study is conducted? So you said you had receptors on the lake shore, one out in the middle of the lake, and I think what you stated, it's negligible on the lake shore. How is that done? Can you give us just a description on how the study works?
Mm-hmm. Gina, did you hear that, and could you potentially speak to that? I know we did hire a sub-consultant, Steve Letitia, that would be the best suited to answer that, but Gina worked closely with him, so I don't know if we can hear her.
I could hear the question. Can you let me know if you can hear me? Okay, Jeannie, I have my microphone up to here, let's see. Okay, you wanna try it right now? Yep, can you hear me okay? How about now? Yeah, maybe. Why don't we try phone, if that works?
All right. Brian, we would try to get her on the phone there if we can patch her in that way. Then if you can just give us your name and
Yep, oh, I'm a little shorter than him. My name is Dan Donaire. I'm the Natural Resource Project Manager for Bolton and Mink. I did write a lot of this with Gina. I did not do the noise section, but I worked closely with her on it, so I'm going to try to muddle through it. I'm going to find it in here. So could you go back to that figure that we showed in Jason's? Yep, the receptors. Thank you. So, there it goes. And hopefully we can get Gina on eventually. So what we did in response to the appeals letter and DNR comments is that we added receptors. The track is obviously on the east side of the lake. Lake shore of the lake, the questions were for nesting and gathering of shorebirds and reptiles and that kind of thing. And so that's where receptors 4, 3, and 5 came in. Receptor 1, we placed there to monitor the noise that's coming from Highway 14, because we thought that that would really indicate what kind of impact this track has on what noise is already there. And then we placed a receptor in the middle of the lake just to find out what the distance was and how the water travel or how the noise travels over the lake. What we found is that the noise, you gotta bear with me here because I wasn't prepared to speak on this. If I can find it.
Was your R3 and R4 put up on top or down below by the lake?
It was put where the nesting and the gathering would take place. Correct. I think, Jason, you had a slide that put that out. Could you back up a little bit, Jennifer? Thank you. Go back. Or maybe that is it. Right. I think we had the numbers, though. It's somewhere. I'm all about the birds and the fish. So we have the table. And where's that table? There it is. Okay, thank you, Jason. So what we found at receptor 3, the existing maximum noise levels without the track were 63.1 decibels, I think it is, or what do they call it here? It's decibels, I think. That's without the track at 63.1. The noise level increase during a track event modeled at 62.6. So just a small increase of 0.5 decibels. Now, when we're modeling the noise levels at the receptors, we're not including the sound barrier. And the reason for that is that the model does not allow for that kind of input. So this is a very conservative measurement. At R4, do you want to go back to that? Thank you, Jennifer.
Is that not the right one?
No, I want the figure, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah,
Apologize.
just so I can see what I'm looking at, right? So R4, we had decibels at 58.4, currently existing decibels. With the track, it increased to 58.6, so another negligible increase of 0.2 decibels. R5 was measured at 67.5. With the track, again, without the noise barriers, 67.9, a negligible increase of 0.4 decibels. And that's during daylight hours and running hours. That is not at night, because we won't be running the track at night.
And so, Dan, if I can ask a follow-up then, so this is all just modeled?
Correct.
So it was based on computerized modeling of what that would be. We didn't set any noisemakers out there to see what we were picking up,
That is correct.
except for number 5 or number 1 you said was
Right.
kind of the base level Highway 14 traffic.
Right. Actually, the model we had receptors that picked up R1, R4, R3, R4, and R2 currently. And then we modeled the proposed.
Jason, did you have something that you wanted to?
Yeah,
Throw in on that, or-
those receptors were put up there just to get the background data. And then what Steve does is take the proposed data and overlays that. So you have the background along with the proposed, and what, is there any, increase to that? And it shows through his modeling that it's negligible.
And does that modeling run all the way up to 105 decibels? That would be the allowed limit of the cars on the
The
track?
acceptable limit that we're holding the track to is what he was running that at. And he was running it without the berms, so we're gonna be putting in the berms to help reduce that further. So it's kind of a worst-case scenario, although we're not moving forward without building those berms themselves.
So the modeling is without berms? Okay.
That's correct, right, Dan?
That is correct.
So you talked about the model, so what did you use for the input for the car noise? You said there's a maximum limit, of 105 decibels.
Right.
That the cars can be, and that was one of the inputs to the model, was that 105? Yeah, I thought there might be a noise generator or something like that, but you just use the calculation of maximum decibel and the disbursement across the acreage? Is that-
Across the acreage and the topography that exists,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
Other questions from the council? So as you know, we had the 2 items remanded back to us from the court. One is impact of the track on wildlife, and so that's kind of a key factor, I think, of what we're trying to look at here. So, I'm just wondering, is there also modeling that can be done with a noisemaker rather than just a computerized what-if situation? And I know computers are great. They can tell us all sorts of stuff, but, if we had something out there, lawnmower, combine, somebody with loud pipes, could we then pick those up on the receptors as well and see what that looked like? And maybe you guys aren't the ones to
We're not
ask,
the
we
ones.
need
I
to ask
think that'd be
the,
a-
Yeah, it would be Steve Platisha is obviously the expert on that. You know, that's obviously another experiment that could be run. So we're basically using imperial data here to show what that would be versus actual data. Is that right? Is imperial actual or is it opposite?
Oh, that's a good question. But one thing to note is that the model that's being used is the model that's used for, what MnDOT uses and, you know, counties use and stuff like that to, you know, build their sound barriers and things like that. So we're using the same type of modeling that MnDOT or other municipalities or agencies would use.
so like in highway construction,
Correct.
if we're gonna measure the impact of a highway against a residential neighborhood.
Exactly.
Do you guys look up like other tracks that are already built? Is there, you know, data from them that we can kind of compare and contrast from what our site is compared to another track? Is there numbers out there you can look up, or is that not?
Well, I think what we talked about through this whole process is coming up with what that limit is. Obviously, there could be cars out there that are outside of that limit, and that's where this sound, monitoring on the site that the proposer is claiming or indicating that they're going to do, and we actually have that sound committee.
It is in the report.
Yeah.
The report,
Yep.
we take data from existing tracks.
So I went out there when the combine actually was harvesting with a decibel meter, and I think I got a reading of about 74 by the road by the cemetery and down by the berm. It wasn't, once you got away from there, you couldn't really, the decibels dropped off considerably. But that's what the,
Your handheld
that's what the
decibel meter?
yeah, that's not with a real decibel, you know, with a microphone on
Can
it.
I speak a second?
Not yet, Tim.
Mr. Mayor, we have to wait
Yeah.
for the public to have comment. Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a question.
Yes.
Are there any special issues regarding the topography that would affect noise in one location versus another? I know at the amphitheater down in Mankato when that was built that they had a sound study, but there was consequences, particularly in North Mankato, which I represent, that they weren't anticipating. Was there anything in the topography that would cause concern to this council that, you know, that there'd be something unusual that could possibly happen? And I understand that's a valley with the limestone and
And a water body. So, talking to Steve, my understanding is in this area, it's a flat topography. We're gonna have 20-foot, is it 20-foot sound barriers around it, which will, you know, lessen the sound. I think in North Mankato, one of the problems is it's on the river, and sound carries across the river. We've all been on lakes, and you can hear the campsite across the lake. But with the sound barriers, we're not expecting to see that.
I was just bringing that up for comparison for
Yep.
topography. So.
Now, my understanding of the project is that there will be no sound barrier on the lake side.
There definitely will be a sound barrier
A
on the
berm
lakeside.
or a wall on the lake side?
Yep, if you want to jump to the site plan, Jennifer, if you don't mind.
Yes. Is that in your,
It's part of the
okay.
report, yep, or in the PowerPoint there, it's the second to last slide. So on that north side, or excuse me, the west side up on this map, you see the berm and the 20-foot sound barrier. So that is included. This entire site is going to be surrounded by the berm and or barrier.
Okay, what's the white gap
The white,
on the very, this will be, well, it's planned north, but it's the west
Yep.
end. Oh, that's
That's-
bituminous.
that's the
Overrun on the
runoff
curves.
areas for the track itself.
Okay.
Yep, whether it's gravel or bituminous, yep. There is a 20-foot high, this, the red line, yep.
Yeah, because the comment I think you made, you can hear across the lake, although we do have some terrain running that way, but are we going to pick it up across the lake? Will it be amplified?
That was the addition of this berm and barrier on that side to alleviate that.
And that was a Ted Nugent concert, I think, that happened in North Mankato.
That was the one I received the most.
NRA was there.
All right, so again, kind of my questioning, you know, I'm looking, you know, for the noise components, and then I wanted to follow up, if we're kind of moving outside of noise, I want to look at the carbon weight, if we're there. Does the council have any other questions regarding noise at this time?
No, I think, you know, my biggest question was how were they doing the other half of that equation, right? The noise generation side, so it makes sense.
Okay. And another one that I wrote down, Jason, was,
Yeah.
you know, kind of moving into, you know, the secondary question of, you know, carbon output, you know, so you had calculation of 9 tons of carbon per day based upon, I'm assuming, number of cars per day crossing by on Highway 14.
That's my jam.
This is Dan.
So then I'm going back into, it was a very minimal amount from the track.
Correct.
And so how many cars, we had about 20 cars per hour per day.
Correct.
So I mean, it would be, let's say in a 8-hour day, 160 cars a day on the track versus whatever the totals are, 14,000, 20,000 cars per day
On the
highway. And maybe I'll
14.
shut up and let you talk.
So this is a very difficult study because there's really no guidance through federal or state review, but they leave little tidbits out there we worked with. And what we decided to do, we have a 2019 traffic study that was conducted on the corner. I don't know what the road the cemetery is on, but that road in 14. So we took that data from 2019 and we were able to break down what types of vehicles were traveling on Highway 14. And it wasn't just that, we could break it down, you know, knowing if it's a rigid truck, a diesel rigid, a articulated gas truck, a diesel articulated gas truck, or a diesel car, or diesel gas. We were able to break it down all the way down to there, and then use U.S. highway or federal highway data on the emissions from each of those vehicles, and how many go past there from an hour. And so what we wanted to do is we took 1 hour snippet of how many of these vehicles go across during the period when the track is running, what vehicles are passing past there in that 1 mile section of 14. And then we know that there's at the track, we're gonna have 20 cars, and we know what kind of cars they are. They're high performance cars, and we know what kind of emissions they make through the same highway data. And so what we came up with, and the most common greenhouse gas, of course, is CO2. And in that realm, we were looking at 9.51 tons of CO2 per hour in 1 mile section of Highway 14. I could break down the amount of cars and all that, but it'll be in the EAW supplement. And then we did the same thing with the gas type cars that are going to be running the track at a 3 mile road course. So again, it's an unevenly weighted equation, but it's also, you know, it's very conservative. And so for that, we came up with 0.031 US tons of CO2 being emitted on the track in 1 hour. So it's a very negligible increase. The problem is there's nobody out there that says, well, this is what's gonna affect wildlife. We have to kind of use a common sense approach to this because there's no numbers by the federal government that tell us, like, you can't go this high because then you're going to affect the geese or, you know, the reptiles or something like that. So what our findings, we believe, are extremely negligible to what is going on Highway 14 and also the future increases on Highway 14. Just west of here, that industrial park just keeps on building and building, which is going to bring more, you know, 18-wheelers and heavy trucks through here.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of shocked by the minimal amount of output,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that it had, and I guess I was kind of, didn't know how you were going to answer the question anyway, so, no, it just kind of jumped out at me. So I wanted to know how that was calculated so we could get to something like that. And Brad, I guess I have a question for you, maybe it kind of jumps over into this. I know I've been approached by Tesla owners, and would a Tesla driver be welcome on the track, and do you have plans, you know, so,
They're already on the track. And Tesla and I think the whole electric car industry is heading in that direction. So we can make judgment on what we currently are seeing and running on the track, but we are running with electric cars currently on the track.
but you gas people are never gonna get rid of your gas cars.
Well, I think you gotta look at what goes faster and it's more thrilling, I guess. The Teslas will take on a gas car and whip it.
I was just shocked when, you know, they sent me an email and said,
Yep.
you know, what's the status of things, so,
It's coming, and I think that we didn't want to overestimate the growth in electric cars, so we really wanted to stick to what we know. And what we know now is the future in racing is electric. And so all of these companies, you see, the only car that Ford is making now is an electric Ford car Mustang. And so it's all heading in that direction. Certainly, it's gonna take some time to do so. And we think that the track in its design is being laid out and to give opportunity for those people to use the track to test those automobiles.
I'm just thinking now in my head too, are there, and maybe that's more, I won't ask the question, I think it's more hypothetical. But thank you, I do know there's push towards electric cars, and I know we're not gonna get rid of gasoline-powered cars, but that would be a trend. Right. Climate change questions from the council.
I guess one of my questions is, what's the kind of the carbon output for an agriculture acre? Is that also,
We did not look at that.
okay,
That's not something we looked at.
okay.
It would be interesting.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a couple of questions. Again,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Yeah, we're,
if I can ask a couple of questions.
yes, please.
You've talked about the emissions for the track. The Court of Appeals sent it back for the project as a whole.
Mhm.
Have you looked at the effect of the project with the buildings and everything else?
Are you speaking to maybe the running of the buildings? Kind of the
Exactly.
maintenance and the
Right.
HVAC type stuff? We did not look at that, no.
Okay, the language that the Court of Appeals had is failed to consider the project's cumulative effect on climate change.
Mhm.
Okay. Is that negligible for the buildings?
I would think so, but it's, it's something we could look at.
Speaking of buildings then, and Brad, I know we've talked about a number of things, so if you can give us an overview of, is the project still, looking at X number of condos? Is there auto strip mall? We've had some things kind of come and go from, golf simulators and things like that. Can you give us
I think realistically, the plan has not changed at all. There's 2 commercial lots there for future development. And I think that the council at the time was asking, what are you going to give back to Eagle Lake? We'd love to see a restaurant, we'd love to see a hotel. So we accommodated that by providing space for other providers to come in and provide that. I'm not in that business, so we pushed the track away from the highway to give commercial land availability for other developers to come in and bring in their product. Whether it be a golf simulator, whether it be a social activity, in which is drawing people to that area, whether it be food or drink or games of that such. The component in which you talk about a strip mall, that is something in which was really more relative to the track, okay? People who are on the track need tires, they need brakes, they need repairs, they need detailing, they want to purchase things which are automotive related. So we would be providing minimal space within the clubhouse area for a sponsor to come in and provide one particular service under one roof and ultimately provide those different options. Now, if you get a discount tire to come in there and do a tire service, or you bring in a larger dealership franchise that can provide the service, the tax, and all of the support that the cars need, that would be our best interest to do. So you talk about commercial space, strip mall, no. It's really a component to the track and to those users who are bringing their automobiles, whether they have a breakdown or they're using some of their inputs on their cars which need to be replaced. Consumables, basically. We're not using that space to attract people to come in and get outside services that are not relative to the track. Okay, all retail sales or service sales which are there within that community on site, on track, are related to those consumers who are using the track for the use of driving their car. Now, if somebody comes in and buys one of those parcels and wants to develop a hotel or anything, they will still be required to come back to you and get the permission and do their proposal as to what they see fit and what they want to do. So it gives you, I think, the control over what retail comes into those spots. And they would come in, as I do, as a developer, and make that presentation.
All right, thank you.
And the number of condos has not changed, 92 condos. And that was part of the original EAW. So we have not changed anything at all from the original concept that we brought in. Except for this added addition here, which Tony has purchased the project property, in which he is in the motorsports business as well. And he's going to be working his motorsports component, I guess, out of those buildings.
But that's outside of the berm, that's kind of outside of the
Correct.
track property proper, we'll say. Okay. Other questions from the council? All right, well then, again, this is not a public hearing, but if there are interested parties here, Brad and Jason, would you be willing to take some questions? And because what I would like to do for the council is to make sure that we have all of the information that we can. So some of you may have questions that are pertinent to what we're looking at here. And again, the court remanded back to us the noise question of wildlife on the lake and the impact to climate change. And so it's our duty then as the responsible government unit to review the EAW as presented. We've gotten some explanation on how some of the testing has been done. And then if we're comfortable moving forward, then we would take a vote tonight to move this on. And then Jennifer, you do have the chart. And so if you slide down, I think in that middle row, in the middle box.
So I have it right here, the third to the right, right here. RGU reviews project, and then you determine complete, and then you go down here, or incomplete, and you go over here. And then you follow the arrows accordingly.
And so again, if you all recall the last process that we went through, the council made a vote, then the project had to be published in the EQB, I don't even know what that stands for, Environmental Quality Board. And so then that gets distributed for public comment, and again, asking public to provide feedback, questions, and all of the agencies dealing with environmental concerns will also respond to that as they did on the last one. So are there questions that are pertinent to our discussion tonight? And again, I'm gonna keep this down. We're 3 minutes tops. Maybe I should start a timer. But let's try to ask pertinent questions
right,
to
that's
the
what I
matter
wanna
at
do.
hand.
Yep.
State
Mike
your name and
Genzel.
address. Okay, you're already right.
Yep, I've been there. Mike Genzel, it's 60374 224th Lane, Madison Lake, right next to the track. It's not over in Madison Lake, so I do have some valid concerns here. Number one, as I'm listening to this thing, they use the noise decibel of these vehicles at only 62 decibels to determine that it's not going to affect it. Well, of course it's not going to affect it if you only use 62 decibels. I mean, I just looked it up on my phone. It took 2 seconds to figure.
I don't think they were using 62 decibels as, again, that was my questioning is, does the model go up to 105 decibels on the potential? Now, I'm not the scientist, but he's shaking his head yes.
What was the car decibel at that you were using, I guess?
The 105 decibels. It's at the receptor, what that sound would be based on that sound on the track, traveling that distance down to that receptor.
Okay. Squealing tires are at 140 decibels. 20 cars every 2 minutes. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's an almost constant, going on. Also, what do daylight hours mean? Is that as the DNR regulates it from sunset to sunrise, or sunrise to sunset? Is it?
It's when it's light out.
Okay.
But the hours of the park would be different. I think the hours would be starting at 9 in the morning.
So there won't be cars on the track before 9 in the morning?
No.
And when will they be off the track?
Generally, the track days will end at 4 to 5 o'clock, depending on, whether it's a rented event or something. But generally, the day's over at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And I did, just so you know, I did note that when I went to Hastings to their track.
Yep.
At 5 o'clock, it was dead. Everybody, all the corner workers were coming in, and I thought, well,
yep,
very interesting. It was kind of like sheep coming back to the barn.
I also found it pretty interesting as we are trying to find out the effects that this project is going to have on the area, as far as carbon emissions and greenhouse, that we didn't look at what the current use of the land is and how it's different. Because if you can't find effect if you don't have a starting point. And their starting point isn't Highway 14, our starting point is a farm. So I guess I don't see how that could possibly fly. The other thing is I don't quite understand why we're not sending this off to a third party to look at it. I've said this before. It's no offense to you guys, but there's people out here that, like Bolton and Mank, do this for a living. But Bolton and Mank is hired by Bradford. Of course they're going to come up with something that fits the project, and tweak it to their design. But who says that that's fit, until you get in someone that's an expert in it. And that's the main point of this whole thing. The traffic study, like we said, this is not just about these two items. This is about the entire, is this EAW okay? This is supplemented to it. The traffic study was done on a hotel and a golf simulator, not on a motorsports park. Now the hotel and golf thing is gone, and we got a motorsports park. They found that intersection out there was just fine for additional traffic. Since that study's been done, it has gotten lengthened turn lanes and deceleration lanes because it was insufficient. for the current traffic. It also got stop signs instead of yield signs because it was insufficient for the current traffic. With the meeting that was going on for 56, I'm guessing you all recall that if Eagle Lake increases that traffic more to where you need an overpass, MnDOT said it would be on Eagle Lake. Well, if you increase this to where it needs an overpass, that's a very expensive motorsports park for Eagle Lake. Let's see here. I guess I got a lot more to say, but it's not a public hearing, so I'm hoping that we're going to get a public hearing,
Yes.
as it was said before, not just to write in your concerns, because I don't think it hits home. I think there should be a formal public hearing.
I don't know that's necessary or warranted in the process. The public hearing is the public comment period.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
I don't know if I'm incorrect in that, Chris. I don't believe that there's anything dictating a public hearing in what you're talking about.
Right, there's nothing that's dictating a public hearing, and quite frankly, Mr. Gensel, I'm not sure what you're talking about by the term real public hearing.
Well, one where everybody can just come in and state their general concerns. You know, I had 4 pages of stuff I'd like to tell you guys about, but it's not pertinent to what they were talking about today, so I'm winding it down for you.
I'm not aware of any public hearing that would ever allow somebody to sit there and read off 4 pages. Whether
Okay.
it's state, federal, or local, that's usually going to be limited by time. I mean, certainly if you have written concerns,
Yep.
that's appropriate to get to the council, and they can take a look at that at the public
Okay.
hearing.
The last thing about this, and it's in the updated supplement, and I hope you've all read through it if you're going to be voting on it tonight already. Right in there, it says, let's see here. This project was proposed over by the Mankato Airport, and most of you know that, but some of you guys are new to this, so I don't know if you know that was there. But half a mile from the airport at most. And in this it says, the noise, it moved to Eagle Lake because, quote, the noise from the road course could have a discernible effect on both wildlife and residential habitants. That's an area where there's 2 homes touching that property, 1 home a quarter mile to the north, one home a quarter mile to the south. It has a train track running right through the corner of the property. It has an airport on the other side of it. If that's going to affect the wildlife there, with all the noise they've got around it already, what do you think it's going to do to what is one of only 60 state designated wildlife lakes? They are the ones that put that in there, that this is going to have a discernible effect. That doesn't sound good to me. I hope it doesn't sound good to you either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Nicole Davros, 101 Valley Lane. I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes. I got a couple of statements, and then I'll get to my questions.
Are you setting a timer?
No, I'm looking at my notes. So before I moved to Minnesota, I had a Minnesotan who was my handyman tell me that there were 2 types of people in Minnesota, self-powered people and gas-powered people. And I think that holds up fairly well. And I will admit I'm a self-powered person. As a citizen of this county, in this town, my concerns with this track are I like to recreate on that state trail. I'm also a birder, although I'm a really lazy birder. So I happen to bird by ear or bird by 7 miles per hour down the highway. I could easily provide you a list of what I hear when I'm out on that bike trail, going by at my 10 miles per hour, 12 on a good day, and it's much longer than what you see in this list. This is anecdotal observations of the wildlife that could be out there during the breeding season. So let's keep that in mind as you're reviewing the potential impacts on wildlife. Early on in this conversation, I heard the excuse that The reason this was the best place for this track was that it's a good piece of flat farm ground. I've lived in Iowa, I've lived in Illinois. Those states are hillier than it is here. You can find good flat farm ground anywhere around here. It absolutely makes no sense to me. We all benefit from clean air, clean water, and nature. I mean, people, forest bathing, right? There's studies that show that being out in nature can calm your blood pressure and do all sorts of good things. We all benefit from that. Very few of us are going to benefit from this racetrack, this motorsports park. You could argue that it's going to provide some tax base. I'd say we can get there another way. And anyone who wants to pit agriculture against wildlife or nature, I'd also argue that putting prairie plantings in along a racetrack is just going to lead to a bunch of butterflies getting smacked by windshields. Whereas a farm ground, you can put cover crops, you can put other things that could potentially benefit. You can stack benefits with farm ground. You can't stack benefits to wildlife with concrete. So my questions, particular to the noise impacts on wildlife, there was a slide up there, I don't know if Jennifer can pull it up. It said that there was no existing data or study to kind of compute the impacts of noise on wildlife. So I guess I'd like some interpretation of that. Are they looking for a formula to plug and chug? Because I did a quick Google Scholar check, and I just did impacts to wildlife of development from roads. And there's a study after study that comes up showing the impacts of roads and development to wildlife and birds in particular, including habitat degradation, loss of nesting, either from nest abandonment, or just, again, lower habitat quality. So yeah, there was something in there. Not there. Oh, I'm sorry, that was it. It says MPCA and FHWA, which I guess I missed what that stands for. Provide little published data on calculating and analyzing noise effects on wildlife from non-highway focused projects. But again, you can just plug and chug into Google Scholar the search terms wildlife noise impacts from vehicles or development. And study after study comes up talking about the impacts of development and roads on wildlife. So I don't think you need a formula to know. So I guess my first question is, did they actually dig into the literature on the impacts of wildlife, or were they just looking for a formula to plug and chug into? And second, are the impacts of noise cumulative or synergistic? So you might have Highway 14 traffic, but now we're potentially adding a little more noise and development. And with that, potentially down the road is more development. And we're putting that right next to a designated wildlife lake. That, from my understanding, is not an easy thing to do. It takes citizens coming together to agree to designate something as a wildlife lake. It's a special designation for a reason. It means they saw value there. And then a state trail that is heavily used by the citizens in this county. So why, of all places, do we need to put this development right next to those things? Why can't it be across the road or someplace else? Why can't it be a few miles down the road, closer to the new truck stop that put up? You know, if you're worried about, it just doesn't make sense to me why it's got to be this piece of land, other than, as Mike pointed out, they tried to put it in Mankato and they didn't want it there. So I think we need to consider those things.
To Nicole's question, I don't know if Bolton and Mink, if you have any follow-up to any of the other studies that she's referring to.
Yeah, I think, what we looked at, we saw some of those studies, but ours was a little different, and what we want to do is compare existing to proposed. I think for us, that was the more telling thing. What we have now, what we're proposing is really going to tell us what the impact of noise would be on wildlife, and that's kind of what we focused on there.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Aaron Genzel, 60374, 224th Lane, Madison Lake. I just would like some clarifications because, as some may know, I have been the one taking the heat online for supposedly spreading misinformation. But I'd like to know why certain questions are not answered so that people, supporters, understand that what they may be fighting for and what they may be harassing me for isn't going to happen. So, will there be a drag strip? Will it be drag racing? Will
Stop,
there be
stop.
Saturday night events?
Stop. Will there be a drag strip? No. Will
No
there be
drag
drag
strip.
race?
In writing, in writing. Will you put it in writing? Put it in writing.
Yeah, and I think that's never been a part of the project that we've ever looked at as a
Yep,
council.
and that is what,
So perfect, we're getting somewhere, right?
yep, because that
Right.
is something that I've never seen in there. So where people got the idea that there's gonna be drag racing, I don't know. And it was never clarified by somebody from the development to say, no, it's not going to happen.
I know there was another proposed park that had drag strip and burnout circles and all sorts of stuff over by the fair.
Yeah, the Wolf
Yeah,
Creek Audubon, yep. And then also, there is a controlled outlet on the lake, on the south end, that we are aware of. But that was all I had. I just wanted those clarifications. Thank you.
And the controlled outlet, I don't know if you did any study on that, Jason. I mean, that's the Weir Dam.
They don't, the DNR does not have jurisdiction on the outlet. It's on private property.
It seems strange. I talked to the DNR and he says that they're gonna put in a new dam to replace that. So I
Yeah.
can just text your phone.
I would think that would be the DNR's piece.
Yeah,
I don't know who put it in.
It's on this property, and so, I mean, it's been a discussion.
Oh, maybe we're talking about two different,
No, there's only one outlet, the
the one right at the head of the creek as it comes out.
They can raise and lower the
Yeah.
level of the lake. And I was told 2 days ago by the DNR that they're gonna put in a new dam.
You can see where it is there, and it's on this property. It's not.
Better tell them that.
All right, yep.
Hi, my name is Nikki Hansen. My address is 23721 583rd Avenue in Mankato, which ironically is exactly the corner where they didn't want it in Mankato. Sorry, everybody that knows me knows I talk fast. Nikki Hansen, 23721 583rd Avenue in Mankato. That's right over by the airport. I'm not political, clearly. I work in healthcare. I have heard about the racetrack only because, if I'm being very transparent, my maiden name is Gensel, so I come from this group. My concerns are more of an interpersonal observation here, and I don't know the council. I know Beth from Eagle Lake Elementary, but I don't know any of you. As I'm watching this, it is so clear that your minds are made up. It feels very much like you're going through the motions, and I want to know, like, why isn't everybody taking notes? Why isn't everybody, like, really engaging with the people that you work for? I mean, this is your community. These are the people that you are working for them. And to watch this as an outsider is just actually really uncomfortable, that you can't even fake it for an hour. I feel like the decision has already been made. My dad brought this up to me, Daryl Gensel. He said, we got to get people to speak up. So I thought, who do I know in this area? I have 3 colleagues that live in the apartments, right, or the townhouses right on 14. None of them knew about the project. That is concerning. It is concerning that it has not been more transparent. And when you talk about...
I would stop you with that.
Okay.
We've been very transparent. This has been on the website for 3 years. We've had meeting after meeting
I know
after
there have been a
meeting,
lot
and
of
so
meetings.
I do not like it when people accuse us of not being transparent. Now,
Let me
if
phrase
they
that
don't
as a
know
question.
about a project, that's not on us.
Let me phrase that as a
That's on
question.
them.
Okay, I don't mean to be accusatory. Let me rephrase that. Do you think, it being your community that we all love and care about, that it would be beneficial to ask other people, not just say, oh, they didn't find it on the website, to put a poll out there, put out paperwork? You can get anything out on Facebook to say, this is what we're doing, this is when we're talking about it. And I don't feel like, I just don't think that people that have lived in those townhouses for years, that not one of them knows about it. I just don't think that's a coincidence.
I think
The
that's,
agendas are published for the city
Right.
weekly. Everything's very public. If people don't look for it, they're not gonna find it, but the city doesn't have the resources to send out every agenda item
Right.
to the
This is a
we're
big
here,
agenda
we're here
item,
every
and
month.
the fact that you
And if
can say
people
if they don't
don't
see it, that's
care,
their problem,
they
is
don't
really,
care.
really disrespectful.
So
And I agree, people probably.
I've been accused of lots of things sitting up here as well. And it's not my job as a city council member to babysit people.
But
All
it
right?
is your job as the mayor to have an informed community that can make informed
And I would
decisions about
love
their
it if the
community.
community had the gumption to come out and be interested in their community.
And how
We
do you
have
think they
some
would
that are
feel
here.
hearing you say that? How do you
Pardon?
think they would feel hearing you say that? I mean, it's part of your job, I feel. Again, I'm not political, send me back to the hospital. But how would they feel to just hear that exact quote from you? To hear the mayor of the town say, if only they had the gumption, I don't think they would love to hear that.
It's on YouTube. We're live streaming right now. I've written about it in city newsletters. Hey, if you're not interested in coming out and getting involved, what more
But do
can
you-
I do?
I see where you're coming from. I also feel that if it were a project of this magnitude, don't you feel that people would come out?
I would think they would.
So I guess that brings me to my next question. Again, I don't really understand like how the process works. You said, well, there's been plenty of time for public concerns. Is that a public forum where it's a discussion? Or
Like
is that?
this, which is not a public hearing, but
I
it
know.
feels like a public hearing. I wanted to have people ask questions that were pertinent to the question of the
Yes, and I'm
council.
sorry, and like I said, I'm new to the process. I want to know is there a public hearing? It didn't sound like there would be moving forward.
No, there will be a public comment period as there was to the previous,
And what does that look like?
that this document
Is
is
that just,
published.
is it just people bringing forward their concerns but there's not a discussion like this?
Then
Which
there
I know
will-
is not a
There will be
discussion.
another meeting to follow up, so the council then will take the input from all of the organizations, from the public, and many of you have great questions, and
Mm-hmm.
I hope you know I'm not discounting any of your questions. You've got great questions, so this is how we need to make our decisions, is to hear. But
And that's, I guess, what I'm getting at, and I
I
don't.
can't have a public hearing every single meeting.
Will there be one before this is voted on?
Mike, Nikki, whoever it is, anybody online, do we need the public hearing for you guys to put your voice out there?
Yes.
Don't you think that 2 weeks ago when I sat down with my 20 neighbors and asked them each how they felt, and we had a 2-hour discussion about it, that we got further in that 2 hours than them coming in here and filling this room where we can open and talk openly to each
That's
other.
exactly what you're saying is what I think.
Not saying that I don't want it, I'm saying that we got a lot further there than listening to the same thing that Mike talks about every time he comes in, and the same 15 pages. Secondly, it's really frustrating when I grew up with you. I lived in your guys' house, I'm not taking notes, I have 4 pages.
Like I said, I was very clear. I don't know what.
You accused us of not taking notes. I have 4 pages of notes. Anthony's been taking notes, so you guys are accusing us of not listening. We're listening.
And like I said, I have not been here for the previous things. I don't know what's all happened, but it does really sound like it sounds like you were really successful and made great progress with your neighbors. You have a much bigger community with your 20 houses than they have on 2 miles.
Okay, your colleagues that don't know anything about this, do they know anything about Rack on the Go? Do they know anything about Tater Days? Do they know anything about the other ones? We can go door to door.
I just don't, okay, I think we can agree that Tater Days, the weekend celebration, is a little different than this.
That's what I'm saying, though. We have talked day in, day out with every committee that we have within Eagle Lake, and this is what really irritates me, is we talk about how can we make it better to the people that don't do Facebook and want it in the mail, the people that do social media only and don't want anything in the mail. They don't go check their mail. Short of going door to door and knocking on their door saying, hey, we're having a meeting tonight, get in my car, I'm gonna bring you.
No,
We can't force them to do that. And that's where we have done, I feel Eagle Lake and city staff internally have done everything they can short of going
even give, the public a chance to, like I said, if there's not a public hearing going to happen where there is a discussion, like a calm, rational discussion where I just want to ask these questions. Like I said, I legitimately want to understand why you wouldn't want your public to know something of this magnitude. This isn't a one-day festival. This is, you know what I mean? And I love this town. I love Tater Days. I'm happy that I grew up here. But I feel like, again, as an outsider, I just do not feel this has been objective at all.
So I think I'll echo what you guys are saying. There's been plenty of spots along this process, this 3-year process, that we've asked for, begged for, and given opportunities for input.
Now, has that been more, hey, come to city council, please come to city council, tell us what you think about the city? Or has it been, hey, there's a huge, huge development coming that could really affect a lot of people? Come talk about that, come hear about that.
Your huge and my huge are different, so I don't know how to frame that. But there's been plenty of opportunities.
But they don't know exactly what it's about. I think any of us who have been to a PTO meeting at school can say.
They don't know what it's about.
You know, so I don't know I'm trying to think of an example. So you go to a PTO meeting. I'm not going to go to every PTO meeting if they're going to talk about what's on the lunch menu. If they're going to talk about slashing class sizes or increasing class, if it's a bigger magnitude decision, I'm going to be there and I will make sure I'm there.
Well,
those are the differences.
You know, what council was saying too was we publish the agenda every time, and it's clearly stated in there that we're going to be talking about the motorsports. And it's been on several meeting agendas. And that goes out, gets posted on our website. There's stuff in the newsletter.
I just think it should be a little, I'm not going to convince you, clearly. But I feel like if you really want to represent the town, and I can tell you're passionate. I can tell that we clearly all have differing views. I'm not trying to accuse you, and I apologize if I came off that way. But if you really wanted to hear what your city wants, I feel like you would give them a chance to come all have this discussion.
But what does that look like?
Right.
That looks like putting it out there and saying, hey, here's what's, I'm not going to convince you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm sorry, thank you.
Mayor, could I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
Or not? I just wanted to clarify, we have, since COVID, have added an extra step to notice, which is not required, but so we do send out the agenda via email and post it on Facebook, which is not required, but just to try in an effort to reach more people because, we put in our newsletter, our meetings are the first Monday of every month, so hopefully people go to look, but we send it out as an extra reminder to people so that and we can tell, Facebook how many people have opened up so people are seeing it. I just wanted to add that just for clarification.
Can I follow up on that? I think it's great. I think you're doing everything that the city has always done, and probably that most city councils do. I think you would be doing a disservice to your community if you do not give them a chance by being very vocal. Give these people a chance to hand out flyers door to door if they want, and say, we're having a vote, or we're having a discussion. By not giving your community a chance to do that is really a disservice to them, the people that are here.
But we have, and I'm not saying that I'm for or against public, we have given them several
I
opportunities.
think you understand the difference. I do think that.
So, actually, all right. No, I might call this thing. Do you have a question?
Cindy Gensel.
That is pertinent to
22083, 604th
If
Avenue.
it's not pertinent to noise,
I would like,
please listen. If your question is not pertinent to the noise concern or climate change, I'm going to cut it off.
it is noise concern.
Thank you.
But I do have another question. But
Hold on.
noise
Hold on, hold on.
concern
Carrie
as
needs
far
your
as,
address.
oh, sorry. What? I did, Cindy Gensel, 22083, 604th Avenue, Eagle Lake. We used to farm the airport where this was first proposed. It's very hard for us to understand in the, written by Brad and his company, that the reason that it was not done over at the airport was because of noise concern, because of neighbors. And like Mike said, there are a couple neighbors. You've got neighbors in the middle of this racetrack.
No.
People, there is a house in the middle of this racetrack. There is a house adjoining the acreage that Bernie just sold, which I wonder, do we know for sure, Brad, you're going through with it? Because he wasn't that I know of, he could have bought that land. He did not purchase that land. Do we know for sure it's going through? Why wouldn't you?
That's not my business.
Okay. I just did want to say something about the noise with when a combine is brought up. A combine is in that area for 2 hours. 2 hours in a year, 3 hours. It is not there every day for 6 months. Totally inappropriate comment.
I don't think the comment was.
I mean, it didn't register.
I think it was trying to say, is there noise, and is this project creating more noise? So we have to have
But
a
the result
baseline.
was the combine was more noisy, is what I understood. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I thought it was that the combine had more
It was
decibels.
within the tolerances that are set. So I don't think this was an attack on combines.
Okay, when we talk about how we can get the community involved, why can we not have, I will print them, I will stuff the envelopes in a bill, in their water bill, with a simple survey. Do you realize what's going on over here? This is what's going to happen to your community. When you want to go outside, you're going to hear that. If you want to barbecue, forget it. It's not going to be fun. At least let them give you a response. And maybe there won't be any response. Maybe nobody cares that we are individual people. If it were you on that street, any one of you want to live there? I don't.
If I could, I don't have much to say. I'll keep it mild. Daryl Gensel, of course. I'm just going to say that I should have it really in front of me, that EAW, that supplement, the inaccuracies in it, because we have the picture I gave you is the old site. I've ran that farmed it since 1975. We own it now, actually. The site, or the parcel, they termed, we moved away from it because of one of the things was the wetlands. What you're terming, or whoever prepared this calls a wetland, is not a wetland. It's converted, it's a farmable, it's in the CRP program for a 20-year program. It comes out this fall. There's tile in there. We plan to farm that again. I'm just saying, they said, we're trying to save the wildlife and all that, and that was one reason we moved away from it. It's not right. The other thing, I'm just trying to point out with this picture, it's like they're trying to snowball us. When they say, we're adding to the noise level and all that out there, there's no noise level out there. What, a commuter plane, a Cessna flies over, I know that. Once every 2 hours or whatever, when the train goes through, it's the same train that goes through here. Only thing, he doesn't blow his whistle when he goes through.
Are we talking about the same property? Are you talking about the Lime?
Yes, yes.
Again, that is not,
I'm
what we're here talking about.
I'm just saying that I think they're trying to snowball us, and some of the things they say.
We're talking about this land right out here near your
and they're moving
farmstead.
that noise right across from the apartments and all that. They're saying they saved the day by moving away from here because it saved the residents. It might be objectionable noise, and now they're taking all that and putting it right next to all the others. So I'll be quiet if you're.
Thank you, Daryl. All right. Mr. Terrell?
Dennis Terrell, 60604 211th Street, Eagle Lake. Last fall, I went out with Councilman Steinberg there when they were combining, and we did a decibel test right beside the combine, and it was really dusty, and it come in at like 98 to 100 decibels. We went down to the end of the field, and we were gauging it as it come down the field. Then we went over the hill down by the bank. We did hear the combine when it come right up to the edge of the bank, And when it went back, maybe 100, 150 feet, you couldn't hear it. Our decibel meter was down to 58 to 60. You could not hear the combine, period. So I'm just saying, if you have a little berm there and stuff, there's not going to be any sound down in that lake.
So the lay of the land is helpful for the sound transmission? Is that what Bolton and Mink has found? At least to the east towards the lake. Yeah, the west, I'm sorry.
Right, to the west. And obviously, the sound, travels through open areas. So the contours that exist out there, along with the berms and the walls that we're putting up, is to help dampen that sound as well.
Okay.
Jason, just to note that the tree stand is also staying around the lake, so that will help dampen the noise as well.
Mr. Borkert? I hope the question is going to be...
I'm only going to do 2
towards-
points off my
Thank
list.
you.
What pertains to this. Gary Borkart, 21402 598th Avenue, Eagle Lake. Directly to Mr. Bass. Has that property and the layout changed at all since that other property was bought?
Only the addition of the 2 buildings in which we wrote.
Otherwise, the track and the layout has not changed?
Not since the original EAW was submitted.
Okay, that answers that question. Number 2, with Bolton and Menick, as far as the wildlife data that you used is 11 years old. What's with that? 11-year-old data is totally outdated
Right.
to the wildlife aspect of this project.
True, and we use the DNR wildlife data they've been collecting since the 50s. And it is old and outdated. But it only gives a snapshot. Be truly honest here. It only gives a snapshot of what's out there. But that's all we have right now. And the reason we didn't go with our own study is because, greenhouse gas effects and noise effects from what we found in the studies we did were negligible. And we don't think it warrants an individual study at this point. And that's something for the DNR to take
My next
into
question
account.
is the data on the eagles. Okay? So when was that data taken that you say that they're not going to be out basically looking for food on the water during the summer months?
Right, so let me get back to what I was saying. Our studies are going to be reviewed by the DNR and the Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the review of this DAW. And they're the ones that are going to direct if a further study needs to be made. And if that's the case, then that's the road, we talked to Brad about it, that's the road we're going to have to go down. But that's up to the agencies at this point. As far as the eagles, there's no noted next. But we all know there's bald eagles in this area. I live down by the Blue Earth River, and they're everywhere.
Right.
Will it affect their feeding capacities, the noise? At this point, we don't believe it, because of the studies we've done.
The next question about noise is, did you take in effect every extra car on that track at the same time? Exponentially gets louder, okay? The sound combines and goes up. Was that in the model?
That is part of the model, yes.
Okay. Now, why haven't you taken and get your base from a racetrack somewhere else that's almost identical to the type of layout this one is? Why do you use just data and not actual physical data?
The geographic area is different in situ. Sounds that are there, the lay of the land, the topography, all of those things are
But
different.
if you took a reading, a dB reading right next to a car, okay, you got that, right? And when they take off, you have that. Every corner changes the sound value. So you can't take one data from this point to point B because that's not accurate. The corners, the screeching tires, the sound level, the gearing up and down of the car, the acceleration of the car is a total different ballgame.
Mr. Borkert, I can tell you from personal experience, because we've been doing this for 3 years. I drove to Hastings, Nebraska, and I know Mike went to the same track.
Right.
and I stood next to the track with my handheld decibel meter. I didn't have a fancy one. But I couldn't hear the cars, as they went away from me. When they came by, I think the maximum I had was about 85 decibels. Now, plus or minus on whatever your phone picks up, but I personally tried to do some of that at a track so I could see what it was like.
Right.
And so I know you've got receptors on your,
I saw no receptors in town.
did you have receptors in
Everything
town?
was plotted on the lake, but nothing was in town, correct?
additional study. The original study looked at the effects on the community itself. This was just.
All right.
And so, yeah, I think, and maybe Jason, I don't know if you can speak to MPCA's limits. It's like 105 decibels is the maximum limit at 5 feet or whatever from the sound source, the car.
Correct.
And then it goes down
It goes
exponentially
down.
outward. And I don't know if
And
you
that
can
all,
speak to the
that's
science
all
of that,
predicated
or-
on state law,
Right, right.
noise laws.
Yep.
So,
All right, anyone
right.
else? Again, this is not a public hearing, and it certainly feels like
No,
one.
this is simple. Lyle Grosskreitz, 22298, 604 Avenue, Eagle Lake. I didn't bring any notes, I just sat and listened here, and probably repeating myself. This started a couple years ago, and for Brad, really into the council. The only reason I kind of know about this track stuff, because we do have kind of a mutual friend, is how I caught on, and then along with my neighbors. First, getting back to something that Nikki was talking about, we get the newsletter that gets sent out to our address, and for the last couple of years this has went on. I think maybe once there's been a mention of the track in there that a Mankato Motorsport Park Sports was potentially coming. There's never an update in it that goes out to the public and says, hey, we're going to talk about this at a meeting. If you're going to get me on the computer or my cell phone, it's not happening. I got a mouth and ears, and that's how I operate. So you're not going to reach everybody. I might be an odd duck, but I think she's got something where that you send it out every month. Maybe an update in there would be beneficial. And two, talk about the Eagles. I work out at my house 24/7. Between 10 and 2, you can all come out. There's an eagle or two fly over every day, north to south. It's just the way it is. So whether it's in your report or not, well, no, but they're there.
Yeah, I've seen
I've
many of
watched
them.
them eat fish guts with the cats and the crows and the coons all together. They land in the yard. They're there. And, three, the building site you have here. And that's on the corner, specifically right across from our neighbors. Now, I know if the county was going to do this, I suspect, as an update, 3 acres to put up a building or do something. Is this going to be built by county code, or is this, because it's annexed in, going to be done by city code where we can just throw something up on the corner and now the neighbor gets to look at some kind of little business out their front window? How is this? I mean, look out the window, new buildings out there, Brad. Is it going to be?
If it's annexed in the city, it's the city that's responsible for the building.
I mean, is there some way to put, I know it's going to be a business of some sort, so advertising signs now along the highway, can't do it if it's the county involved, because it's annexed in, now you've got some type of lighted billboard or something, or advertising for the business out in their yard, or is it going to be skirted with maybe a row of evergreens or something, so she doesn't have to see, Main Street out her front window?
There's a mechanic's place, if you keep going farther down the road.
That'd be me.
Okay, that's you.
That'd be me.
So you're running a business across from somebody's house. Do you have any advertising to get
Nope.
people to know
Nope,
where you're at?
never in my life.
But they can visualize
Word of mouth
that
in
you're there,
ears.
okay, by the cars that are parked there, and by the doors that are open, and by the work that you're doing, right?
I do work there and I do, but I don't advertise.
If he wanted to put a sign on his building, that would have to meet the code that the building,
From the city.
from the state. or from the
Right.
city.
Is your question more related
Well, I'm kind of protecting the neighborhood for appearance. I mean, would you be open to putting a row of trees between your business and the road? so that she doesn't have to look out her front window and see, you know, a new motorsports business. That's all I'm saying, you know? Because right now,
My goal's never been to run my business out there. I have a spot in town, it's more for storage, more for, I think the project works well with my business too. We sell a lot of the products that, that people that own these kind of condos would buy. So it's not gonna be a customers come and going, business hours type of business. It's gonna be more for storage.
and you'd have your own driveway off of County Road 27 getting just right into there. Okay, so. And would you be open year-round or just during the months of the track as well?
Say that again?
Would you be open year-round out there as a business?
And again, you know, I have a location in town. I don't plan on
Okay,
staffing it.
and that's,
It's more of my personal stuff, you know, stuff that coincides with this project.
okay. I just thought it'd
So
be
you might
interesting.
go to it once a month if you don't need it to access anything out of it, or you might be in it several times a day if, depending on what the day looks like.
Correct. Or, you know, again, you know, something we've talked about is store trailers for inside there for if someone has an issue and they need their car brought up to the cities. We have an enclosed trailer parked inside, so there's not junk outside.
It's not a 24-hour come-and-go deal for, okay, that's what, you know, we don't have the information on that. So, but I would mention, you know, if you could put it in your monthly newsletter, maybe more people would, I mean, I look around and I see mostly my neighbors, who's here from the city.
It's a
Kind of
question that,
self-explanatory.
it's a question that we have sometimes.
Right.
Nicole's back there.
Good. Thank you.
Yes. Lyle,
Yes.
can we get your name and address for the record?
22298, 604 Avenue, Eagle Lake. Yep. Grosskreutz. Grosskreutz.
Just one comment?
Yes.
Just on that, someone had told me when there was the playground, you were wondering about getting playground equipment, that there is a survey sent out in one of the billings. Is that true? That's what I'm kind of talking about. Something like that, that they could just have, you know, some information that it's really getting to everyone it would be in a monthly bill. I think that'd be pretty simple. I'd be more than happy to come stuff envelopes.
Do we send monthly bills out though?
They go out in a postcard.
We do get them?
Yeah.
Little thing, I won't
I get them on magnets, I never look.
I really won't. But over the weekend, I wanted people to attend and voice their, you know, concerns with all this. And, well, nice weekend, I got a little three-wheel scooter I run around with. I was in Eagle Lake, and all of a sudden, a couple would be walking their dog along. You know, you guys see it all the time. And I'd pull over and talk to them. I'd say, hey, you know, there's gonna be a meeting, you know, at the City Hall on Tuesday about this proposed racetrack, or as I term it. And, oh, no, I didn't know that. And, oh, if I'm not busy, I'll be there. I don't see any of them except Jim. He's Jim Solar and Betty. They're the only ones. I must have talked to 12 people. And, oh yeah, I'll try to make that. They're not here. I don't know it's no shortcoming on anybody's part, but they just don't.
This has been our struggle as a council. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think every council person, and some of you have maybe served on a council, the lack of interest seems
Yeah.
to be dwindling in the process, and so
Such a big
I'm glad
thing.
you're all here. You know, we can talk about things, and
I
I'm
didn't
glad
think
you're
you
all
were.
here. So what?
I didn't think you were very glad.
I just have two clarification questions to ask, if you don't mind. I know people are getting tired. So I heard you ask about, like, the ruling was the cumulative impacts, and HVAC wasn't necessarily considered in that cumulative impact. So my question for the council is, what do you do with that information that maybe this wasn't exactly what the court had ruled they should do? And then second, the map of the sensors, the noise sensors, I guess clarification on whether they were in the wetland or along the buffer on the outside of the wetland. Because I'd argue that wildlife aren't just using the lake, they're also using the buffer around that. And so the noise is going to be hitting the edge and those trees before it goes down to the wetland. So yeah, maybe noise isn't getting to the wetland, but what is hitting the buffer, the outside of that buffer, where other wildlife are existing. So how do you address that, given that it looks like those sensors are in the wetland itself and not on the outside edge?
Jason, Dan, is there information you could give on how those sensors were placed? What that looks like?
They're placed in gathering and nesting areas. That's what the comments from the DNR were.
So it would have been probably located in the reeded edge?
So are there no birds that nest in the tree canopy on the outside of that?
No, it was in the emergent section of the wetland.
I'll go find you an oriole nest on the outside.
Say, Tim, just one thing, if you go back to that picture of the new layout, and the reason I say new layout is this is the original layout that the first EAW was. Now, does that look like that? That's the one that was in there. See all the clustered stuff, buildings?
Right. And I can tell you then, from what you're getting to, Mike, when we go through the EAW process, and we're going to be doing this for another housing project in town, so any of you that are here, we will be doing this again for another project, and typically, we don't get to this level of scrutiny on development in the community. And maybe our attorney can guide me if I say the wrong thing, but in the EAW process, there is the opportunity to make minor changes to the data, which we removed some buildings, I think what is kind of what you were showing.
And moved them to other places too.
And so am I incorrect that?
That'll happen in the EAW process, that we'll have it presented with a particular plan, and that throughout the process, it might get modified somewhat. You know, unfortunately, nothing's ever concrete until we get the building permits that are going to have to be issued in the manner. But things can change or get modified. The question is how much do they get modified if they affect, what we were originally looking at.
So we've seen the same components, 92 condo units, a clubhouse, the retail space, and maybe that's attached to the clubhouse now, or?
I think it was, now we did have a public hearing, and I met you at an open house, okay? In which I had sent flyers to every single person in which I got a mailing list from the city. And I think we might have had 2. So we brought all of you here to the city hall, and we talked about this proposed track. And it was prior to the council even taking on the possibility of actually receiving a proposal. They wanted to hear from you first. And what they did is they asked me if I would put together a comprehensive postcard in which I could give you the gist of what I'm inviting you out there to do. And inviting you here, they offered this building for us to have that. We brought in the professionals who were designing the track, the professionals who were working on the environmental components in which were going to be a part of the proposal. And that's where I met you, okay? And you keep coming up here and talking about racetracks with drag strips. We had that conversation multiple times. You know there isn't a drag strip a part of this, and there never has been. And also, I think when you change things around every time you come up and talk at the podium, nothing's changed. And the things in which you're indicating up here on this map of the track has been downsized, the development has, because we took the opportunity to go through a public comment period about the concerns in which you had and other people had. And we reduced the size of this based upon the comments which we received from the public. And so you can't hold it against me for changing the original map of the track. Well, we changed it to compensate some of the comments in which we got from being at that public hearing, okay? So there has been a public hearing, and we have been here for 3 years. And maybe we've been here too long to where we forgot what the project really is, because a lot of stuff keeps getting brought up in which Jason and I have to stand up and identify as being never quits. And they have to make a decision, okay? You took them to court. You didn't want this farmland to be converted. Now, you also had the opportunity to buy it, okay? And you didn't buy it.
We tried.
But you didn't.
Well, not all of us at bottomless pits.
But you didn't, and you talk about the other.
Let's not, please, let's not get into. No, if you want to take the conversation outside after we're done, I would allow that. But I hear what you're saying, and again, we're at a point where this council needs to determine whether information provided to us meets the environmental study quality and expectations of a particular project that goes on. So it was remanded back to us. My understanding of the court case is that they said the decision that the council made was legitimate. The EAW was in essence passed, except for 2 items. How the track affects climate change and the noise impact to wildlife. So that's kind of what we're looking for. That's why we're here. We kind of had a public hearing, and sir, I see you must have something on your mind. You come up to the podium. You're going to be our last question tonight. How about that?
Dennis Wendland, 112 North 3rd Street, Eagle Lake. You said a sound or a noise study was done on the south side of 14. How much extra noise is going to come from that over the noise of 14?
I don't know if you can comment on that. That was in the previous EAW, and so the level, I think, is listed in that previous document. I guess I don't know that off the top of my head.
It was within the Department of Health's guidelines. I don't remember what those numbers were offhand.
We can get you that information if you'd like us to follow up.
Yeah, if we would.
Okay. Jim?
Have I got it?
I was going to do my last question.
We missed that one. Jim Solar, 101 Creekside Drive. I have one comment, and I understand that all of the vehicles that run on this track will be street legal, Minnesota legal.
That.
In regards to noise
Yep.
pollution, yes.
Also, I was on the Mankato Township Planning Commission for 14 years. We always looked at the highest and best use for a piece of property. Whenever something new come up, the highest and best use for that piece of property. Tax-wise, service-wise, whatever. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Council, are there any further questions? I guess my biggest concern from what we've heard tonight, if I'm kind of culminating everything in my head from what was talked about, I think when we start to talk about the cumulative effect, as you had asked the question, on the entire project to climate change. So we've studied the CO2 output of the cars. Is there a way, and maybe I'll put you two on the spot, is there a way to calculate out additional climate change impact of the buildings and then give us a base of what the current use of the land, I guess, generates as far as CO2 and what that change would be? Is that something that can be quantified?
I think so. We'd have to do some research, but I think there's been studies. So I think we can correlate what we're doing, what Brad's doing out there to what's proposed, what's been studied before. We can take a look at it.
I think we focused on the vehicles themselves because that's been just kind of a major topic, and that's the major use of this is the ability to drive these cars on. So that's what we focused on, and realistically came up with a negligible amount of that. I think we could go through another exercise to look at what the HVAC may contribute to it. Is it going to be significant? I guess I'll leave that up for a study if we need to do that. I don't think it's going to be, but again, that's merely my opinion.
Okay. I guess as far as the rest of the council, any concerns about what you've heard tonight with these two items?
Should we be concerned about what Chris said with regards to the cumulative effect of the whole project, looking at it, with those exact details? Do you think that's something we should be taking in mind, that question that you brought up?
What I'll do is I'll read what the Court of Appeals said, because I don't want to necessarily, I'm not a voting member of the council, so you guys can make the decision as to whether or not there's enough here or not. But what the council what the court remanded it back to us for is that it basically said that we failed to rely on substantial evidence to determine the project's potential effects on wildlife and failed to consider the project's cumulative effects on climate change. So if you determine that them looking at CO2 by itself regarding the vehicles is sufficient to meet that standard, then you can say that we don't have to ask for anything more. The same is true regarding wildlife. If the looking at the noise effects on wildlife is enough to meet that standard of what the Court of Appeals sent it back for. If you don't feel that the study reaches the conclusions for those two issues, then you should not, my recommendation is that you do not find that they've met that and ask for more findings.
Anyone else have any questions? Then at this time, I would entertain a motion if we so choose. I guess in one of two actions, either one, that we determine the EAW to be complete, and at that point, we would distribute our decision to the EQB for public comment. I believe there's a 5-day period for us to get that in, and then that goes out to the agencies and to the public for comment. Or if we think that there's additional study that that might be needed for these two items, we would declare it incomplete at this time, looking for the additional information. So would anyone like to make a motion one way or the other on those two items? No one willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for the latter, right? So only on that one single item, do we need more information on it? I'm proposing. I'm more than satisfied for the noise side, but I think the cumulative effects opens us up if we don't answer that question.
I would suggest that you just make a motion that it's an incomplete submittal, then we can discuss what additional issues we want them to address.
I'll make that motion. That it's incomplete and.
Is there a second to the motion? I would second the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
The motion carries. So then at this time, Jennifer, if you can, you've already done that. We're at the top right section. The City Council has determined the submittal incomplete, and then we would remand that back to the proposer to bring us the additional information. And so, Chris, how are you?
I would request that the council, if we're sending it back to them, we certainly need to send it back to them on greenhouse gases. Again, the Court of Appeals, when they sent it back to us, didn't give us a lot of direction, but they did not limit it to CO2. and it did not limit it to vehicles. So I think that we probably need a little bit more of a study for the council to have a full basis on that. In regards to the wildlife, the Court of Appeals did not send it back, saying what were the noise effects on wildlife. They just asked for what the effects of the project were going to be on wildlife. So we probably want to have a study that's directed a little bit broader than what they have here, just to have a little bit more of the effects. And I think that would make the council feel much safer and confident that we've looked at all those considerations. But that's, all I can do is go back to the specific language that the Court of Appeals had. And the way that they worded it, it wasn't that, we're looking at the noise effects on animals. It was what's the effect of the project on wildlife. And, if we're going to make this bulletproof from any future appeals or not, we want to make sure we're addressing what the Court of Appeals had.
So I think we need to give Bolton and Mink and Mr. Bass some clear direction on that. So, I think, John, you were heading towards that cumulative effect.
Yeah, I think for the greenhouse gases, it's a cumulative effect. I think it's pretty broad language, and we have to make sure that we answer that broad language. For the effect on wildlife, there's tons of different domains that effect happen, right? So I don't know how to structure that to make sure that, one, it's not broad enough that we're just continually doing this, but it satisfies the council and the broad language of the appeals court's decision.
And certainly the council can say that they find that they met that burden here, and we'll go with the findings that you come up with. But that was a concern that I have, is that there's a lot of addressing the one issue. There wasn't a lot in the report about others.
All right, so then what I think the council then needs is primarily focused on that question of how the project in its entirety, affects climate change. And again, I think that would be looking at current use versus here's what we're going to get and that cumulative effect. Any other concerns wildlife-wise then from the council that we can give them guidance?
Will they be talking to the DNR on that? Because we've got some, I did talk to the DNR and they were quite clear on their personal thoughts on this.
I believe they will be, yes.
Would that include the effect on the water quality, being that you're going to make so much impervious?
No, it would just be climate change.
Would that be part of the effect on wildlife, though, going straight into the water?
I don't think that's the direction of the motion.
So, yeah, that's what I was concerned about. It's like, we just tore a little corner, and now it's not totally open. So we need to put some guardrails. And I'm not sure what those guardrails should be.
I can't hear.
Oh,
No, we're not in a public hearing. I'm not gonna allow any more speakers. I'm sorry. The council's made its decision. We're trying to get to the next step, so you'll, no.
They did it on what was, does that include?
I'm not going to take your question. Do you understand what I'm saying?
We didn't talk about safety training, is that still part of it?
So, Jason, do you need more clarification? Did you hear?
No, if you could repeat your last statement.
well, I totally lost it, sorry.
Sorry, sorry.
No, I think, we just need to keep it pretty tight, what do we need to do? We could go soil erosion, we could go water quality, we can go foliage, we can go. And I think that would be terribly detrimental to the project. So
Right.
how do we make sure that we're making the right decision and not get into this spiral of continually saying, oh, what about this? What about this?
Right. And I think I understand your point on this climate change and how we focus, mainly on the vehicles themselves, right? What is that?
Yeah, we know there's going to be buildings. We know there's going to be other things. What's that? I'm with you. I think
Amount,
it's gonna be a
just so we're
minuscule
clear on
amount.
what that is.
Right, and that
And
way we can answer the question when it goes to court. that we addressed the cumulative effect, not just the car effect of the project.
Great. I understand that.
Right.
Yep. We can do that. Yep.
Yeah, I think what we're, just to be clear on that, what we're looking for is the buildings. What effect do they have on greenhouse, transportation of the vehicles to the project, and then you've already taken care of the vehicles on the project.
Yep. Got it.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Bass and Bolton and Mink for coming tonight. I'd like to thank the rest of you for coming tonight as well. I'm sorry that I had to use the gavel. But again, we had almost a public hearing tonight, so I want to hear, what the community has to say. The council wants to hear what the community has to say. We do struggle, to some points. Nikki's gone, but just in getting information out to people. And Daryl, if you invited a bunch of people and only Jim showed up, this is kind of an example of where we're at in society.
That's just it, that actually people agree with you.
Right, right.
Most are against that we talk to, but they don't say it. So I think once it's up, there's gonna be a lot of very unhappy Eagle Lake people.
Well, we're just trying to do what we need to do from the council's perspective. We're actually going.
Are they gonna be unbiased on getting, do I understand that Mink is going to do the EAW? I mean.
That's what we've been discussing all night is the EAW, yep.
But is that an unbiased person, like Mike brought up? What about getting someone else in here? I mean, they're obviously for the project.
Well, I can tell you, we did a third-party review the last time, which was not required. The council does not have to have a third-party review. We did this because we wanted to understand more fully what we were getting into. There is another EAW that's going to come before the council on a housing development, and I can tell you, it won't have the same questions that you're bringing up.
Good or bad?
Well, and I would.
And we don't give this much scrutiny to other developments.
This is not a housing project.
Right, I know that,
It's
I know
less
that.
than. But, I would look back to Bolton and Mink as a well-established, reputable firm that's,
Right, I don't mean any disrespect.
But they are employed
They are very employed.
But this is
Everybody's employed by
how the
them.
process goes. Dan?
You asked me this question sitting here.
I did ask.
When we think about an unbiased opinion, yeah, we are working for Brad, but our job is to, from a natural resource side, to look at all angles. And when we submit this EAB or EAW, it's going to the DNR, it's going to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Corps, all these agencies. And if we're not being unbiased, Brad's never going to get his project. And our job.
They'll give us a report.
Well, there's professional and ethical standards that they have to adhere to keep their certification within the state of Minnesota, so.
And our job is to help Brad get through the AW process, but we also have a reputation with these agencies that we uphold. And we're not going to throw garbage at them for somebody.
I just want.
All right, well, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and thank you. Jennifer, did you have an update for the council?
Stay here, listen to any of what we're talking. It's not on the agenda, it's just an update, it's not an agenda item, but I was just gonna mention that I don't know if my microphone, there, now it's working. We, at the last meeting, had talked about a police officer possibly being background for another agency. We did receive a resignation that'll be included on the upcoming July 11th meeting. And in the past, our past practice has been to post it internally when we have candidates that would be considered eligible. So we posted it internally. We'll see if we get any interest. And if not, we can post externally. But I just wanted to let you know we did receive a resignation for a full-time officer, and that will be on the July 11th meeting.
All right, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned.